I dare you to kiss the next waitress who walks through that door." James Blackwood glanced up from his glass of bourbon, eyebrows arched at his friend Marshall's bold challenge. The private dining room of Altitude, his latest restaurant venture, hummed with the laughter of his close-knit group, reveling in the success of his 10th restaurant opening. "Excuse me?" James inquired, adjusting his bespoke suit jacket with precision. "You heard me?" Marshall grinned, reclining in his chair. "When was the last time you did something spontaneous? How about something unexpected?" The remaining 4 companions at the table fell into a hush, their attention fixated on the unfolding interaction with increasing curiosity. "That's absurd," James scoffed, raking his fingers through his dark hair. By the age of 35, he had crafted his restaurant empire with meticulous planning and thoughtful choices, steering clear of rash moves. "Put your money where your mouth is," Marshall urged. "A generous donation of $50,000 to the charity of the winner's choice. Unless you've lost your edge." James felt a surge of annoyance. He hadn't reached his current position by shying away from obstacles. "Fine. A new waitress passes by. I'll kiss her." "Not our waitress," Thomas, another friend, clarified. "That's too easy." "Someone from another restaurant." James nodded, his drive to compete sparked. "Deal." 20 minutes later, they caught sight of her. A blonde waitress balancing a tray of drinks, rushing past their secluded dining room toward the bustling main restaurant area. She was clad in the uniform from Rustico, the rival Italian eatery across the street. "There's your target," Marshall murmured, gesturing subtly in her direction. James finished his bourbon in one swift motion and rose to his feet. "Observe closely." He moved into the hallway, catching the waitress's attention with a captivating smile. "Pardon me." She halted, gazing up at him with weary blue eyes. "Yes? Can I help you with something?" Up close, James noticed the dark circles under her eyes and the way she balanced the heavy tray with practiced ease. Her name tag read, Sarah. "I just wanted to say you're doing an amazing job," James said smoothly, closing the distance between them. "Thank you, but I really need to deliver these." Before she could complete her thought, James leaned in and captured her lips in a fleeting kiss. For a brief moment, Sarah stood still in disbelief, yet contrary to the anticipated slap or furious response from his friends observing from the doorway, she unexpectedly kissed him back, with determination and assurance. Then she pulled away, leaned close to his ear, and whispered, "I know exactly who you are, Mr. Blackwood. If you ever try something like this again, I'll ensure everyone sees the true character behind those upscale establishments." She took a step back, her gaze burning with defiance. Without uttering another word, she turned and strode down the hallway with her tray of drinks, her posture upright and dignified. James remained frozen in place, his usual calm utterly disrupted. "What just occurred? What's on your mind?" Marshall inquired, approaching him. "Did she really kiss you back?" "I lost the bet," James replied softly, his gaze fixed on the path she had taken. "What did she say to you?" "You look like you've seen a ghost." James shook his head and made his way back to the private room. Throughout the remainder of the evening, he found it impossible to concentrate on the festivities. The woman's voice lingered in his thoughts, accompanied by the unexpected gentleness of her lips meeting his. Later that night, after his friends had departed, James inquired with his restaurant manager about the personnel at Rustico. "What can you tell me about the blonde waitress over there?" "Her name is Sarah Miller. Puts in extra hours nearly every day. I believe she has a younger sister in the hospital." "What prompts your inquiry?" "No reason," James replied, gazing out the window toward Rustico. "Just curious." The following morning, James awoke earlier than he typically did. Rather than perusing his stock portfolio as was his routine, he found his thoughts drifting to Sarah Miller, her weary gaze, her surprising reply, and the peculiar sensation in his chest when she had regarded him with such insight. After years of indulgence, James Blackwood, a millionaire restaurateur who possessed all that wealth could offer, found himself genuinely captivated by someone who appeared completely unfazed by his riches and prominence. leaving him at a loss for how to respond. 3 days after the kiss, James found himself unable to banish Sarah from his mind. He stood outside Rustico at 9 p.m., observing through the window as she navigated seamlessly between tables. "This is absurd," he murmured to himself, but he still opened the door and asked for a table in her section. Sarah almost fumbled her notepad when she reached his table and realized who he was. "You've got to be joking," she whispered to herself. "What can I get for you, sir?" "Just coffee," James replied. "And a moment of your time." "I'm working," Sarah replied sharply, her professional smile remaining intact. "Coffee coming right up." As she returned with his coffee, James interjected before she could make her exit. "I must extend my sincerest apologies. The kiss was out of line and just a foolish wager." Sarah observed him intently for a moment. "I suspected as much," she responded with a calm demeanor. "Apology acknowledged. Now, if you'll pardon me, some of us have jobs to attend to." James departed, leaving a generous $100 tip for a modest $5 coffee. He came back the following night and the night after that as well. By his 5th visit, Sarah's chilly courtesy had transformed into a weary sense of familiarity. "Aren't there restaurants of your own to attend to?" she inquired, pouring him more coffee without waiting for a request. "Yours serves better coffee," he answered with a slight grin. Sarah let out a dramatic sigh. "What do you truly desire, Mr. Blackwood?" "James, if you would be so kind. I wish to rectify things in the right way. Let me buy you dinner." "No, thanks," Sarah replied without hesitation. "I don't date customers, especially those who kiss strangers on bets." Just then, her phone buzzed, displaying her sister's name on the screen, interrupting her response. Sarah quickly made her exit, her voice tinged with concern. "Rachel? Is everything okay?" James observed as Sarah's demeanor changed from concern to anxiety. When she came back, her face was etched with worry. "Is everything all right?" he inquired. "It's fine," she replied instinctively. "Your check is here whenever you're ready." The next week, James showed up just as Sarah's shift was concluding. He stood outside, watching her emerge from the restaurant, her weariness evident in her demeanor. "Are you following me now?" she inquired, wrapping her coat more snugly around herself to fend off the autumn chill. "I was hoping to catch you after work," James confessed. "Only for coffee. A genuine exchange. No ulterior motives." Sarah glanced at her watch. "I have to head back to my sister." 15 minutes, James insisted. "There's a diner around the corner that stays open late." Sarah hesitated, then nodded with a hint of reluctance. 15 minutes. The diner was almost deserted. In a secluded booth away from the bustling crowd, James observed a rare moment of ease in Sarah as she cradled a steaming mug of hot chocolate, her hands seeking warmth and comfort. "Your sister," James began. "Is she all right?" It was clear that Sarah was taken aback by his question. "She's making progress. It was a car accident 6 months back. She underwent spinal surgery, and the recovery has been challenging. That's why you put in those extra hours." "Someone has to keep the lights on," Sarah replied with a casual shrug. "Insurance only goes so far." James felt a strange pang in his chest. "It must be challenging." "It's life," Sarah stated matter-of-factly. "Not everyone has millions to rely on." "Fair point," James conceded. "I've put in the effort for what I possess, but I've also had my share of privileges. Enjoying the thrill of sharing spontaneous kisses with waitresses just for the joy of it." Sarah arched an eyebrow. James flinched. "I deserved that." To his surprise, a subtle smile played on Sarah's lips. "Yes, you did." What began as 15 minutes extended into 30, then an hour. Sarah recounted tales of Rachel, her sister's unwavering resolve during physical therapy, her aspiration to attend college despite the challenges. James was drawn in by Sarah's clear affection for her sister and her straightforward attitude towards their difficulties. "Why restaurants? What did you mean by that?" Sarah inquired after a moment. "With your money, The possibilities are endless. I began my journey as a line cook, James confessed. Food was the one thing my father couldn't find fault with. When he tasted something I prepared, he actually fell silent for a change. Sarah observed him with newfound curiosity. Underneath the facade of the millionaire playboy, there lies a genuine individual. Quite disheartening, wouldn't you agree? James grinned. Sarah glanced at her watch and rose suddenly. I truly must leave. Rachel will be anxious. Can I accompany you home? James suggested. No, Sarah replied decisively. This wasn't awful, but it doesn't alter anything. As she pivoted to depart, James shouted after her. Sarah, if you ever need anything— I don't need your charity, she interrupted sharply. I was about to mention, a companion to converse with, James concluded softly. Sarah paused, her expression softening slightly. Good night, James. As he watched her walk away, James realized that for the first time in years, he had engaged in a conversation with someone who looked beyond his wealth and status. Someone who dared to challenge him rather than simply agreeing with everything he said. The sensation was simultaneously unsettling and oddly invigorating. You've never been to a farmer's market? Sarah asked, her disbelief evident as she navigated James through the lively Sunday morning crowd. How is that even possible? James shrugged, feeling somewhat out of sync in his stylish casual attire amidst the everyday shoppers. I have people who shop for me. Of course you do, Sarah said, rolling her eyes. Today you're treating yourself to some shopping. It had been 3 weeks since their late-night coffee. What started as James occasionally visiting Rustico had transformed into an unexpected bond, a cautious friendship. After Sarah mentioned her Sunday morning farmer's market ritual, James had surprised them both by asking if he could join her. Now he followed her from stall to stall, watching as she carefully selected produce, checking prices and quality with practiced precision. Here, Sarah handed him a fresh strawberry. Taste this. James took a bite, his eyes widening at the explosion of flavor. That's amazing. Is it really better than what you find in those upscale restaurants? She playfully challenged. Significantly improved, he conceded. I'll take 2 baskets, he told the vendor. 1 is more than enough, Sarah interjected. You're just one individual. Actually 2, James countered, then noticed Sarah's look. Fine 1. As they wandered through the market, James began to observe details about Sarah that had previously escaped him. The way the sunlight danced in her hair, how her serious demeanor softened when she laughed, the tender way she interacted with the elderly vendors. I made some calls regarding Rachel's insurance situation, James said as they paused for coffee. There's someone who could potentially assist with her situation. Sarah's smile dimmed. I didn't request that. I understand, but I have contacts who could be of service. Just a meeting. Sarah swirled her coffee, the tension clear on her face. What's the reason behind this? James pondered the question with great seriousness. Because I can. Because it matters to you. After a thoughtful silence, Sarah nodded. I'll consider it, thank you. The next Thursday, Sarah reached out to James for the first time. Her voice was strained with tension. Rachel's insurance rejected her request for the upcoming session of physical therapy. I'm unsure of my next steps. I'm heading there now, James replied without hesitation. Text me your address. Sarah's apartment was compact yet organized, adorned with second-hand furnishings and walls lined with photographs. Rachel, a younger reflection of Sarah with the same blonde hair but softer features, sat on the couch enveloped by insurance paperwork. Ah, so you're the renowned James, Rachel remarked, studying him with intrigue. Sarah mentions you quite often. Does she? James arched an eyebrow at Sarah, who flushed a bit. I assure you all complaints, Sarah said quickly. He's here to assist with the insurance chaos. As the hours passed, James made calls, pulled strings, and maneuvered through the bureaucracy with the same precision he brought to his business affairs. By evening, Rachel's physical therapy was authorized for an additional 6 months. How did you accomplish that? What do you think? Sarah inquired as they stood in her cozy kitchen, crafting a modest dinner together. Sometimes it's all about knowing which buttons to push, James replied, awkwardly chopping vegetables in her direction. Though I clearly lack the finesse here compared to my business negotiations, Sarah chuckled, demonstrating the proper way to hold the knife. You're hopeless. I'm learning, he replied, relishing the intimacy as she directed his hand. Their bond grew stronger in the weeks that followed. James welcomed Sarah into his realm. Private dining experiences, a captivating orchestral concert, the breathtaking panorama from his high-rise apartment gazing over the skyline. In exchange, Sarah introduced him to local theater performances, her beloved bookstore, and the art of preparing uncomplicated dishes that were absent from any of his restaurant's offerings. My friends believe I've gone a bit crazy, James confessed one evening as they strolled by the lake. Marshall keeps asking what you've done to me. What have I done to you? Sarah inquired, her curiosity piqued. James pondered the question. Made me see things differently. When James got an invitation to a charity gala supporting medical research, he found himself unexpectedly thinking of Sarah. Will you come with me? He inquired after her shift one night. It's for a good cause, and I'd really appreciate your presence. Sarah paused, contemplating. I don't really have anything fancy to wear. That's not a problem. James dismissed her worry with a wave. I don't want you buying me clothes, James. Rent then, please, Sarah. I'm not good at these things without someone real beside me. On the night of the gala, James stood anxiously outside Sarah's apartment building. As she stepped into the room clad in a simple yet elegant blue gown, her hair elegantly swept up, he found himself momentarily at a loss for words. You look beautiful, he finally managed to say. Sarah beamed, a touch shy yet undeniably happy. You clean up pretty well yourself. At the gala, Sarah captivated James' business associates with her genuine warmth and keen insights. James beamed with pride as she delved into a thorough discussion with a hospital administrator about patient care policies. Your date is truly remarkable, Thomas remarked to James. Not your usual type. She's not my date, James responded without thinking. He paused, searching for the perfect expression. Later, as they emerged onto the terrace for a breath of fresh air, the city lights unfolded before them. Something changed in the air between them. Thank you for tonight, Sarah said gently. It turned out to be better than I anticipated, James chuckled. Exceptional commendation. As their gazes locked, James instinctively leaned closer. This time when their lips met, it was devoid of wagers or ulterior motives, simply a heartfelt bond that had been developing over the past weeks. Sarah's hand gently caressed his cheek as she leaned in to meet his lips once more. The tranquility was shattered by the persistent ringing of James' phone. He hesitated before pulling away to answer it, his demeanor shifting as he absorbed the words on the other end. What is it? Sarah inquired, her brow furrowed with worry. James' voice carried an emptiness as he responded. My father. He's gone. The funeral was a bleak event, marked by the presence of more colleagues than true companions. James stood rigidly beside the grave, his face an impassive facade as the minister uttered words that felt more fitting for a stranger than for his father. Sarah remained silently beside him, having firmly insisted on joining him despite his objections that her presence was unnecessary. I understand that I don't have to, she had stated with conviction. I want to. As the ceremony drew to a close and attendees exchanged condolences through handshakes and business cards, Sarah stood unwaveringly by his side, her hand gently brushing against his arm, a quiet assurance that he was not alone. Was any of that true? Sarah asked softly as they strolled back to the waiting car. About him being a loving father and devoted family man. James let out a brief, humorless chuckle, remaining silent otherwise. Within the confines of the car, James at last opened up about his father. The relentless scrutiny, the unattainable expectations, the emotional distance disguised as fostering resilience. Words flowed from him like a torrent unleashed, emotions he'd kept at bay for years finally cascading forth. It's been 3 years since our last conversation, he confessed. He warned me that my restaurants would collapse within a year, that I would never achieve anything of value. Sarah listened intently, her hand clasped around his. He was mistaken. Was he? James inquired, gazing out the window. I own 10 thriving restaurants and possess more wealth than I could ever use in a lifetime. Yet the only person by my side at my father's funeral is someone I met just a month ago due to a foolish wager. You have me because you revealed your true self, Sarah said softly. Not the millionaire or the businessman, but the person beneath it all. That night, Sarah remained with him in his penthouse apartment, comforting him through the intricate grief that washed over him in waves, not as a lover, but as the sole individual who had glimpsed beyond his meticulously crafted exterior. In the tender days that ensued, their bond grew stronger. James recounted tales from his youth, a blend of joyful instances and poignant recollections. Sarah recounted the loss of her parents 5 years prior, a tragedy that thrust her into the role of guardian for Rachel at the tender age of 24. Is that why you're so set on managing everything on your own? James inquired one evening as they relaxed on his balcony, the city lights twinkling below. Most likely, Sarah conceded. When you're all someone has, you can't afford to fail them. 2 weeks after the funeral, they went to Rachel's physical therapy session together. James observed as Sarah supported her sister through challenging exercises, her patience and resolve clear. As they exited the medical center, the billing clerk beckoned Sarah to one side. James couldn't catch the words exchanged, but he noticed the color drain from Sarah's face. What's wrong? He inquired as they strolled toward the vehicle. Insurance is challenging some of the treatments again, Sarah said, her voice strained with anxiety. They're claiming the next phase isn't medically necessary. James observed her shoulders stiffen, noticing the burden return to her. Instinctively, he grasped her hand. Allow me to assist, he murmured. I can handle this. Handle it how? Sarah inquired, withdrawing her hand. I can cover the costs for the treatments, Sarah, every single one of them. You wouldn't need to stress over insurance, bills, or those exhausting double shifts anymore. Sarah halted her steps, her face transforming from shock to a more resolute demeanor. Is that really what you believe I require? For you to come in and solve all my problems with your wealth? I'm merely attempting to assist, James replied, bewildered by her response. So you think of me as a charity case? Sarah crossed her arms. By addressing my issues as if I'm merely a task to be completed. That's not what I meant, is it? Sarah challenged. You see a problem, and you just throw money at it. That's your role, James. It's simple for you. What's the issue with making things easier for you and Rachel? James inquired, his frustration mounting. Why is it so difficult to accept help? I need to stand on my own 2 feet, Sarah declared, her voice rising with determination. I have been responsible for both Rachel and myself for many years. I don't need a wealthy partner to save me. The term partner lingered in the air, as neither had clarified their connection until that instant. I don't wish to save you, James said with a softer tone. I have deep feelings for you, Sarah, concerning Rachel. What's the purpose of having wealth if I can't utilize it to support those I cherish? Sarah's expression softened just a bit, yet her determination held strong. I value your intention to assist, but this approach isn't right. So what is the right way? James inquired, sincerely seeking clarity. I'm not sure at this point, Sarah confessed, but I have to work through this on my own. I need you to understand that. They separated that evening, the tension lingering in the air. James honored her wishes, yet he found it difficult to grasp her refusal. Sarah recognized the kindness behind his intentions, yet she couldn't shake the feeling of being belittled by his offer. The following morning, without seeking Sarah's input, James placed a call to his attorney. I wish to organize a discreet payment for all medical costs related to Rachel Miller, he directed. Ensure the bills are settled anonymously, but keep my name out of it. 3 days later, when Sarah called to inform him that the insurance company had inexplicably changed their stance, and approved all of Rachel's treatments. The weight of guilt in his chest revealed to him that he had made a grave error. "That's wonderful news," he said, his tone measured and composed. "It's strange," Sarah remarked. "They wouldn't explain why they altered their decision." James swiftly shifted the topic, yet the weight of his dishonesty lingered in the air, unseen but palpable. As they gathered for dinner that weekend, Sarah examined his face intently. "Did you have a hand in the insurance approval?" she inquired straightforwardly. James paused for a moment, then gave a slight nod. "I made some calls." Sarah set down her fork. "After I clearly asked you not to get involved." "I didn't pay for it," James insisted. "I simply exerted some force in the appropriate areas." "You didn't even ask me," Sarah pointed out. "You didn't respect my wishes." "I was just trying to help," James insisted. "I don't require saving, James," Sarah replied softly. "I need to be understood." She gathered her purse and stood up. "I think we need some time apart to figure out if we want the same things." As she walked away, James didn't try to stop her. For the first time, he realized that his attempt to help had actually created the very thing he feared most. A distance between them that all his resources couldn't bridge. James gazed at the quarterly reports scattered across his desk, his mind drifting far from their contents. A month had slipped by since Sarah had left their dinner table, and the city felt more desolate in her absence. He honored her plea for distance, even though every instinct urged him to mend the circumstances. The stillness that hung in the air served as an unending echo of his error. "You look awful," Marshall remarked, sinking into the chair opposite James's desk, still sulking over the waitress. "Her name is Sarah," James stated with a hint of intensity. Marshall lifted his hands in a gesture of capitulation. "Sarah, then, did you reach out to her?" "She doesn't want to hear from me." "Since when does James Blackwood back down without a fight?" Marshall was put to the test. James reclined in his chair. "This isn't a transaction I can push forward. I made a mistake. I attempted to address her issues in my own manner, rather than truly hearing what she required." "So you're simply going to remain here wallowing in self-pity?" "What did Marshall inquire?" Just as James was about to respond, his assistant knocked and stepped inside. "Mr. Blackwood, I have those reports on Rustico you requested." James nodded, accepting the folder. Once his assistant departed, Marshall arched an eyebrow. "Rustico? Isn't that the place where Sarah is employed?" "Worked," James corrected. "They were having financial troubles. The owner is considering a sale." Marshall observed his friend intently. "And you're considering purchasing it because it's a solid investment prospect," James replied instinctively. "Right?" Marshall replied with a hint of doubt. "Nothing to do with a certain blonde waitress." James leafed through the folder, his brow furrowed at the figures. Rustico was on the brink of collapse, just 3 months away from shutting its doors for good. The team, Sarah's friends and co-workers, faced the grim reality of unemployment. "I could buy it," James mused, lost in thought. "Maintain the existing team, upgrade certain tools, and recruit a more effective marketing crew. And when Sarah discovers that you've purchased her workplace," Marshall inquired, after she clearly expressed her desire for solutions that don't involve your financial support. James shut the folder with a weary breath. "You're correct. But you're still going to take action, aren't you?" Marshall understood his friend all too well. "I have to contribute in some way," James confessed. "But not in the same way as before. Not by seizing control or throwing cash at the issue. Perhaps begin by inquiring what she truly requires," Marshall proposed. "It's a unique idea, I understand." Meanwhile, Sarah was engaged in her own challenging discussion with Rachel across town. "I can't grasp why you refuse to call him," Rachel remarked, shifting her stance on the couch. Her recovery was progressing well, but she still moved cautiously. "You obviously miss him." "It's complicated," Sarah sighed, folding laundry with more force than necessary. "He showed he cared by helping with the insurance," Rachel noted, despite his misguided approach. That's the issue, Sarah clarified. He believes that caring equates to solving every problem. I require a companion, not a supporter. Then just convey that to him, Rachel replied straightforwardly. Communication, sis. It works wonders. Sarah's phone buzzed, displaying a call from her manager at Rustico. She responded to hear unwelcome news. They're selling the restaurant. Rachel inquired after Sarah hung up. Sarah nodded, her expression reflecting deep concern. Martin can no longer sustain it. He's seeking buyers. However, it's probable that it will be transformed into a different concept. Everyone will lose their jobs. I'm sorry, Rachel replied gently. With my medical bills getting better, I thought things were looking up. It's not your fault, Sarah reassured her. We'll find a way. We consistently follow through. The following week introduced an unforeseen turn of events. Martin convened an all-staff meeting at Rustico. I've secured an investment partner, he declared. Someone ready to invest the capital we require, while allowing me to remain the managing owner and keeping all current staff intact. A wave of relief and astonishment swept through the room. Who is the investor? Sarah inquired, her suspicion evident. They've requested to stay anonymous, Martin clarified. All I can express is that they have faith in our work here and wish to see it thrive. Sarah's initial thought was James, but she swiftly brushed it aside. He would have mentioned it if he were purchasing the restaurant. Moreover, investing anonymously was never his approach. He ensured his name was attached to all his possessions. In the weeks that followed, Rustico experienced gradual changes. Fresh kitchen tools emerged, the booking system saw enhancements, and a simple marketing initiative attracted new patrons. Yet the essence of the restaurant, its team, offerings, and ambience, remained constant. One evening, Sarah caught wind of Martin conversing with the beverage distributor regarding the new partnership deal. The investor is adamant about maintaining the staff, Martin was saying. I was required to sign a contract that ensures everyone's roles are secure for a minimum of 2 years. Sarah's suspicions deepened. Few investors would impose such a condition unless they had a vested interest in the team. In the meantime, James was pouring his energy into a fresh endeavor. The concept had begun to flourish amidst his discussions with Sarah regarding healthcare challenges. A foundation, his attorney inquired during their discussion, dedicated to assisting families in managing healthcare costs. Precisely, James agreed. Separate from my restaurant group, which has its own board and management. I'll provide the initial funding, but I want it organized to accommodate additional donations in the future. Is there a particular name for this foundation? James recalled Rachel's unwavering spirit during her physical therapy, and Sarah's fatigue after long shifts to cover medical expenses. The Bridge Foundation, he concluded, for families seeking assistance to navigate challenging times. As the foundation structure began to form, James couldn't help but reflect on Sarah's words. I don't require rescue. I need to be understood. For the first time in his life, James was creating something not just with his money, but with a genuine grasp of the issue he aimed to address, not to dictate the outcome, but to offer assistance that upheld dignity and independence. 3 months after their separation, James received an unexpected call from Marshall. I did something you might not appreciate, Marshall started bluntly. What did you do? What do you mean? James inquired cautiously. I encountered Sarah at Rustico, Marshall recounted, and I may have brought up your role in rescuing the restaurant. James straightened in his seat. Marshall, we had a pact. I understand, Marshall interjected. But she had the right to know, and you both are far too obstinate to resolve this on your own. After ending the call, James sat in anticipation, eager to see how Sarah would respond. Would she be upset? Would she perceive this as yet another overstep? Yet no call arrived. No message. Just continued silence that felt more significant than before. That evening, as James prepared a simple pasta dish, one Sarah had taught him to make, he wondered if some bridges once broken could never be rebuilt. James heard the knock at his door just as he was removing the pasta from the stove. He hadn't anticipated a visitor, and for a brief moment, he thought about letting it go. Yet, an inexplicable force drew him to the entrance of his penthouse. Upon opening the door, he found Sarah waiting, her cheeks flushed as though she had been hurrying. "You saved the restaurant," she remarked directly. Anonymously, James found it difficult to decipher her expression. Marshall tends to be quite outspoken. "Why didn't you share that with me?" Sarah inquired, remaining in the doorway. "May I come in?" she asked, breaking the silence. James stepped aside, suddenly conscious of the pasta sauce bubbling on the stove. "Her recipe." "I'm cooking," he said a bit clumsily. Sarah trailed behind him into the kitchen, her eyes fixed on the way he stirred the sauce. "Is that my tomato basil?" "I've been practicing," James admitted. "It's still not as good as yours." The comfortable familiarity of the moment lingered between them, rendering the 3 months of separation both immense and trivial. "Why did you approach it like that?" Sarah finally inquired. "The restaurant. No name, no control, no." The mark of James Blackwood on everything. James turned to confront her. "You were correct. I was attempting to resolve matters in my own way, without grasping the true requirements." He motioned for her to take a seat at the kitchen island, as he dished out 2 plates of pasta. Sarah took the seat yet kept her coat on, not entirely ready to settle in. "Marshall mentioned you started a foundation as well," she said, twirling pasta around her fork. James nodded. "The Bridge Foundation. It assists families in managing healthcare costs and dealing with insurance difficulties." "Just as Rachel encountered," Sarah noted. "It drew inspiration from her." "By you," James acknowledged. "However, it functions autonomously from me." Expert oversight. A board possessing genuine expertise in healthcare. I merely supplied the initial funding. Sarah took a bite of pasta, her expression becoming gentler. "This is genuinely impressive." "High praise." James smiled slightly. They shared a comfortable silence for a few moments before Sarah broke it. "Perhaps I reacted too strongly," she said thoughtfully. "Regarding the insurance calls you initiated, it originated from a sincere intention, even if the method was flawed. And I should have paid attention to your true needs," James admitted, "rather than presuming I had all the answers." Sarah placed her fork on the table. "What I needed was a partner who valued my autonomy, who recognized that addressing an issue isn't solely about financial solutions." "What is it that you require now?" James inquired softly. Sarah finally took off her coat, letting it hang over the nearby stool. "I need to know if you've figured out the difference between helping and taking over." James pondered her question with a thoughtful expression. "I believe that to be the case. Assisting involves providing support while honoring the autonomy of the individual. Taking over means imposing solutions without regard for what the person actually wants." "Textbook answer," Sarah noted, her tone playfully teasing rather than critical. "I've had 3 months to think about it," James confessed. Sarah rose and made her way to the window, gazing out at the twinkling city lights. James stayed on the island, allowing her the freedom she needed. "Rachel's making great progress," she said at last. "She's starting college classes next semester." "That's wonderful," James responded with genuine enthusiasm. "And I've been accepted to nursing school," Sarah remarked. "Part-time program so I can keep working." James felt a swell of pride. "Sarah, that's incredible. You never mentioned wanting to be a nurse." "We never reached that point," she replied matter-of-factly. There was much left unsaid. James moved carefully, positioning himself next to her at the window. "I'm eager to hear about it if you're ready to share." Sarah turned to him, her expression candid and straightforward. "I have longed for your presence. Even in moments of anger towards you. I missed you." "I missed you too," James replied gently. "Every day." "If we try again," Sarah said thoughtfully, "we must stand on equal ground." Varied resources, diverse backgrounds, yet equals in the connection. I desire that, James concurred. I've never experienced that with anyone else. Sarah finally beamed, the tension lifting from her shoulders. What comes next? Now, James said, extending his hand toward her with deliberate slowness. We begin anew. No wagers, no saving. Just two individuals navigating life side by side. Sarah intertwined her fingers with his. I would enjoy that. Later that evening, they found themselves on James's balcony, sharing stories of the months they had been apart and their aspirations for what lay ahead. James revealed his intentions to introduce family-friendly policies throughout his restaurants, motivated by the challenges faced by staff such as Sarah. What about the foundation? Sarah inquired. Will you take part in its management? I thought you might find this intriguing, James proposed. Given your background and nursing education, you'd have a deeper insight into what families require than I do. Sarah appeared taken aback. You'd trust me with that? Completely, James replied with a straightforward assurance. It was always meant for someone like you to lead. As the night deepened, neither seemed inclined to conclude their gathering. When Sarah finally glanced at her watch, James posed the question he had been restraining. Will you remain? Sarah hesitated, then nodded. But just to sleep. We're beginning anew, don't forget? In the morning, they prepared breakfast together in James's seldom-used kitchen. The uncomplicated warmth of home resonated in a way that James's past relationships never did. I have an idea, Sarah said as they tidied up. Perhaps we could host a dinner, inviting Rachel, Marshall, some of the Rustico staff, and your business colleagues. Let's unite our worlds. I would love that, James replied. Shall we meet at my place or yours? Sarah laughed. Mine is the size of your closet. Size doesn't matter, James said, then added with a grin. Although I possess the superior perspective. And the superior kitchen, Sarah admitted. While they organized their dinner, James recognized the significant changes that had occurred since that initial spontaneous kiss. The wager that had introduced Sarah into his existence had revolved around demonstrating he still possessed his sharpness, about triumphing. Now, all he desired was to create something enduring with the woman who had looked beyond his riches to the individual within. What occupies your thoughts? What's on your mind? Sarah inquired, observing his pensive demeanor. You know, losing a bet can sometimes turn out to be the greatest victory, James said, pulling her close and placing a gentle kiss on her forehead. Sarah smiled up at him. Just don't try kissing any more waitresses to test that theory. Never, James promised. I discovered the singular one that holds significance. 1 year later, if you had told me 2 years ago that I'd be planning a wedding to a millionaire restaurateur, Sarah said, adjusting the simple diamond ring on her finger as she and Rachel walked through the park on a crisp spring morning. And if you had told me I'd be wrapping up my freshman year of college while juggling a part-time job at his restaurant, I would have thought you were out of your mind, Rachel beamed, her movements radiating a newfound confidence that masked any hint of her past struggles. It's been quite a year, hasn't it? Exactly 13 months had passed since Sarah and James had reconciled in his penthouse apartment. In that time, their separate worlds had gradually merged into something neither could have imagined when they first met. The Bridge Foundation approvals have increased by 30% this quarter, Sarah remarked, glancing at an email on her phone. We're assisting more families than ever. The foundation had thrived under her guidance. While pursuing her nursing studies, she had brought together a team that grasped the difficulties families encountered when dealing with medical costs. James had provided the resources, but had given Sarah complete autonomy in shaping the foundation's approach. Rachel mentioned that the mentorship program is expanding, too, with 10 new students this summer. The initiative was a collaborative effort between Marshall and James, aimed at providing young individuals from underprivileged backgrounds with the chance to gain foundational knowledge in the restaurant industry. Several of the initial participants were already employed in management roles throughout James's restaurants. As they turned the corner, the sisters noticed James at the park cafe, engaged in a deep conversation with Marshall. There they are, James beamed, rising to welcome them. He leaned in and pressed his lips gently against Sarah's before graciously offering her a seat. How was your morning meeting? Productive, Sarah replied. The collaboration with the hospital is progressing. We'll be able to place patient advocates in 3 more locations by fall. Marshall shook his head in feigned disbelief. Who would have imagined that my foolish wager would result in all this? Best $50,000 you ever lost, James reminded him. Speaking of the bet, Rachel said with a playful glint in her eye, are you ever going to tell me exactly what happened that night? Sarah always gets vague when I ask. James and Sarah exchanged knowing glances. Their amusement was clearly visible. Let's just say your sister left a lasting mark, James remarked with tact. That's the understatement of the century, Marshall grumbled into his coffee cup. Their conversation shifted to wedding plans, which reflected the blend of their personalities. Elegant but not extravagant, meaningful rather than showy. They had chosen to hold the ceremony at Rustico, where their story had begun, with Martin proudly hosting the event. The renovations on the house were completed by the contractor yesterday, James remarked as they wrapped up brunch. We can move in whenever we're ready. They had bought a cozy home situated halfway between the city center and the suburbs, close enough to James's restaurants and Sarah's foundation offices, yet with a yard and ample space for the future plans they had started to consider. I still can't believe you decided to part with that stunning penthouse view, Marshall remarked. Some views hold greater significance than others, James remarked, his gaze lingering on Sarah. Later that afternoon, James and Sarah decided to take a detour on their way home, pausing at the very spot outside Rustico where their paths had first crossed. The restaurant was closed between lunch and dinner service, the sidewalk silent. Do you recall the exact spot where we stood? James inquired, scanning the surroundings. Sarah gestured towards a location by the side entrance. Right about there. You caught me just as I was heading to deliver drinks. James led her to the precise spot. I was so fixated on securing that wager, I never anticipated the path it would take me down. To be fair, I didn't make it easy for you, Sarah reminded him, her smile playful and light. I believe my precise phrasing was something along the lines of ensuring that everyone understood what sort of individual conceals himself behind upscale dining establishments. You were right, James conceded. That's precisely who I was at that moment. Sarah caressed his face softly. And what about now? Now I'm just a man in love with an extraordinary woman, who happens to be marrying me in 3 weeks, Sarah laughed softly. I wonder sometimes what would have happened if a different waitress had walked by that night. James shook his head. I can't envision my life unfolding any differently. Each decision, every misstep, every triumph, they all brought me to this moment, to you. As the sun started to dip below the horizon, bathed in a warm glow that illuminated the street, where their unexpected path had started, James embraced Sarah tightly. You know, we never really revisited that first kiss, he suggested, a playful smile dancing on his lips. You mean the one where you caught me off guard and I had to threaten you? Sarah raised an eyebrow. That's the one, James nodded. But this time no bets. Just us. Sarah wrapped her arms around his neck. Well, when you put it that way, their kiss was nothing like that first surprising encounter. This one carried the unwavering essence of love, tried and true, between two souls who navigated their paths to one another against all challenges. Behind them, the lights of Rustico danced to life as the team readied for the night ahead, casting a glow on the very place where a millionaire and a waitress embarked on their unforeseen adventure together.